Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. Listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Life's Essential Ingredients. And boy, do we have some ingredients today coming all the way from Australia. We have Simon Drew, who, if you're on YouTube, going to watch this. He is a young man, but he is wise beyond his years. And so a little bit about our guest. First of all, where you can find him. SimonDrew.com. Actually, it's SimonJedrew.com, or his Instagram, SimonJedrew. And also, please make sure to listen to his podcast, The Walled Garden. So a little bit about Simon. He's an Australian philosophical mentor, poet, author, musician, and photographer. He received his Bachelor of Music Performance from the Queensland Conservatorium of Music and is currently studying for a Master of Divinity at Trinity College. Simon is well known for his work with the Practical Stoic Podcast, which has since evolved, like we mentioned, into The Walled Garden. Simon finds great satisfaction in helping artistic and creative clients to think differently about the creative process, the philosophical and theological implications of artistry, and the role the artist in culture at large. Inspired by his creative heroes, as well as by his own experience as a creative artist, he helps clients get the most out of their gift, to overcome major personal objections while creating the conditions for their talents and gifts to shine. I love that. Speaking of gifts and shining, Simon's authored his first book, The Poet and the Sage. Congrats on so many fronts and for the hard work and dedication to being a student of life. Simon, welcome to the show.
Jeff, man, what an introduction. I appreciate that. I know that a lot of that was, my words from the website, but, it's rare that you'll find a host that will, kind of really do the research and take a look at what I'm doing and try to pull together pieces and give a full picture. And look, I'm honored, man. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you for being our guest. And again, this is Life's Essential Ingredients. And I just get so excited to figure out, what does that mean? And when I ran across you and our paths crossed to, hey, let's get on this show, I just got so excited after kind of researching you a little bit, because my life, and you're probably not aware, but I've worked 29 years as a registered nurse, and a good chunk of those in a level 1 trauma center. And so I've been surrounded by death. And I think it's given me a different perspective to try and get busy to living. And then you're probably not aware, but I also have a pretty significant aneurysm on my aortic root, which kind of somewhat limits some physical things that I can do, but has opened up a lot of doors to some mental opportunities to stretch and grow and like you say, share my gift and help my gift shine on other people. So again, I get excited for every episode, but this one I'm really fired up. And in researching you, normally our show starts with a thought of the day, but I gotta come with yours because it just gave me goosebumps when I read it. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but it's one of your poems, and it's a rainforest in Australia called Mary Cairncross. I can't tell me how to.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Mary Cairncross. It's a strange name. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I was like, I had to look that up. I was like, what? And then I looked it up and saw some incredible pictures, and you painted the most beautiful picture through these four little kind of sentences I'll read here. But here it goes. And again, this is from Simon in his words. I enter these gardens with no expectation of show, nor with desire to receive anything from the garden. It is because I do not seek to gain that I gain much. I just love these. I come here to pray, and as I do, the garden whispers deep secrets into my heart. I come here to participate in the drama that is constantly unfolding amongst the ancient trees which have formed the brilliant natural cathedral above me. Woo! I'm stopping it right there, and there's much more to it, but how was it just to write that and to put those words down? And I'm guessing that's part of your book, and I got this from his website, and again, I screwed it up at the start of this thing, but he's got some incredible information to share on his website. And again, listeners, it's simonjedrew.com. So make sure you check that out. But congrats on just writing that, and give me some insight on how it felt to write that and what was that process.
Hey, look, I appreciate the encouragement there, and it's always really good to hear that people are having these experiences with your work. Any artist wants to know that their work is being delivered and received, and I can tell that with you it's been received, and that's just beautiful. And how is it to write that sort of stuff? It's a process of constant discovery. I feel as though what happened when I wrote The Poet and the Sage, and that poem didn't actually make it into The Poet and the Sage. It's The Poet and the Sage is a collection of poetry and prose that follows a specific narrative, but nonetheless explores really deep, theological and philosophical questions. But you might say about the fundamental ingredients of life, the good stuff. And the funny thing is, I had never really written poetry or prose before writing The Poet and the Sage. It was something that happened to me. It wasn't something that I decided to do. And it was, I would say, well, my first truly artistic experience was composing and writing the poetry for Paradisa Suite, which is my first piano album. I released that in late 2020. But The Poet and the Sage was created almost immediately after the first steps towards that album being made. And I guess to describe what it's kind of like to write that sort of poetry, I'll tell you the story of how I came to write The Poet and the Sage, because that's really the genesis of my poetic career. But then since then I've written, and the Mary Cairns Cross piece is one of them. I've written, I would say 200 to 300 more poems, and there's plenty more books to come once this one sells enough, but the experience of writing it was very strange, because I started, I always knew that I wanted to write a book. That was on the table. Now, I always thought that I was going to write like a personal development book or some sort of book about Stoicism, here's your 10 steps, how to be a Stoic, that sort of thing. But then when I started writing, it was kind of on accident. I started writing out this very strange waking dream that I was having. It was like, it was this strange kind of archetypal metaphor, sort of symbolic collection of thoughts that followed this strange narrative. And I didn't know what it was or what it was about, quote unquote, but I knew that there was something strange going on. So I took it to my mentor, Sharon LaBelle, who I've just told you about before we started this. And I said, Sharon, what do you make of this? I knew that she would be a person who would understand how to deal with a young artistic mind. And she, as she does every time I show her anything, is just great, just do it, great, it's amazing, just do it, not because she's just trying to pepper me up, but because she senses something good in art when she sees it. And so after that, I started writing more and more, and I realized that I'm a poet, and I mean that not in a sense that I've chosen to be a poet. I wrote something on my website recently that I think makes the most sense to me in terms of how I describe myself to people. I said, I'm a philosopher in my heart, because that's where my heart pulls me towards these deeper questions of life. I'm a poet by calling, because I didn't choose to write The Poet and the Sage or any of my works like that. That's just my natural voice that I have to write in. And I'm a musician in my being. That's what I've been since I was a child, and I cannot live without music. And so I guess to write stuff like that, it's it's a process of letting go and allowing the thing to happen rather than trying to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, that makes complete sense. And that was one of the, I'm always taking notes. And yeah, two key things early on. You talked about constant discovery, and then you said it happened to me. And I think that's those are just, again, the show's name is Life Essential Ingredients. And I think having a mindset that just is always looking for things that can touch you, and your heart, and your mind and your soul, and then just letting that happen to you. I think again is why I'm so honored to be part of this show, and to have guests like you, because I think getting into that space is a little bit more and more difficult as time passes. And I think the importance of reading, poetry, of going on walks in nature, of allowing our brain to just be at peace, to let life happen to us, kind of like what you do for your clients, to allow their gifts and their talents to shine. But I guess I'll jump in and use that as a time of what would you do? What advice would you give to somebody that's listening here? Like, man, that sounds so cool, but it's hard for me to get into that space, and to even realize what gifts do I have? And I feel pulled in a million different directions in this constant tug of war with whatever is pulling at people these days. And we can talk for hours and hours about that. But what advice would you give to somebody to take to help them figure out what is their gift and how can they slow life down?
Yeah. That's a $1 million question, right? I mean, I have lately been really thinking about some doctrine that I was taught when I was growing up in the Mormon church. Like I grew up as a Mormon. I don't attend church anymore, but what I will say is that culturally, I still feel so much of an affiliation with the church, just because, I mean, they made me what I am today in so many ways, and I feel that culturally there's still so much of a tie there. But one of the lessons that I was always taught as a young kid was, you've got a light, don't hide it under a bushel. Like that classic biblical trope, right? Like don't hide your light under a bushel. And I think that the reason why I feel confident working as both a philosophical mentor, but also specifically working with so many creative individuals, is simply because as I said, I'm a philosopher by heart, and so some might say, well, why don't you just do the work of artistry? Well, I love bringing people in along on that adventure with me. And I love talking art and philosophy and wisdom. And philosophy is just the love of wisdom, right? And so I feel confident talking to people about this because I've done the work, and I might actually share a bit of an example of that, because what you're asking is, how do you get somebody to wake up to the light that is within them and give them permission to follow that light? And I think that first you have to start by assuming that perhaps you don't know as much about who you are as what you previously thought. And that's what I've been trying to do over the past 3 years in particular. I've been trying to strip away these ideas that I have about myself and allow myself to kind of just watch what I'm doing in my life from a far away perspective. And in that way, to not say, well, I'm this and I'm that, and I do this and I do that. No, but just to say, if I was watching myself as if I didn't know who I was, what would I say that I am? And that's why I say I'm a philosopher by heart. I'm a poet by calling. I'm a musician in my being, because that's just observational knowledge about what my nature is as a human being. And I had this experience. I'll tell you this. So I have a degree in jazz, trumpet, and singing performance. And so for a long time, I considered myself as, I'm a jazz trumpeter and singer. That's what I am. It's like, man, you want to put some boxes around yourself creatively. You call yourself a jazz trumpeter and singer. But what ended up happening, it's funny because my first instruments were actually the piano and the didgeridoo. So the didgeridoo is the sacred instrument of the Australian Aboriginal people. And it's incredible because essentially what you're doing when you're playing a didgeridoo is you're basically playing a tree. That's it, a hollowed out tree. That's it. And when I was younger, I played a lot of piano. My parents got me this, little cheap keyboard, and, I'd noodle around on it. I found that I was very good at playing things by ear. Not that I wasn't a brilliant protege, but, I could listen to something and I could replicate it on the piano simply. And that was my little talent. So my parents looked at this and they thought, great, we'll put him in lessons. And that's exactly what, it's the best thing they could have done as parents. It's all, but the thing is, they put me in lessons, and this teacher was, was a classical teacher. So it was, play these notes at this time and do this and do this. And after about 3 lessons, I hated the instrument, didn't want to do it. So I turned away from the piano. Now, over my life, I picked up trumpet, which I adore, the flugelhorn, which I adore, horn instruments, and started singing. Well, I've always been singing, I guess, but professionally. And then I fell away from piano and also from didgeridoo. And it's not until the last 2 years that I've actually brought them back into my life. Actually, my didgeridoo is right behind me here, this big stick behind me. And I had this, have you ever seen the movie Wayne's World? Do you remember those ones? Yeah, I had a Wayne's World moment in a music store in 2020 where I saw this piano. And I was like, she will be mine. and that day I spent way too much money. But what ended up happening, Jeff, is over that year, I fell in love with the piano again. And I started playing and playing and playing. And I started watching myself. And I thought, you know what? I've practiced piano more in the last year than I've practiced singing or trumpet playing in my entire life. And I have a degree in those instruments, And so that taught me, like, wow, okay, I'm not a jazz trumpeter and singer. No, I'm a musician. But then, oh, hang on, I write a bit of poetry. Okay, so I'm not just a musician. I'm a creative artist. Okay, but I also do philosophy. Well, perhaps I'm just a creatively minded individual and I'm exploring abstract ideas and concepts and art forms as much as I possibly can. Okay, that frees up my mind as an artist. And this isn't for everyone. I mean, like, there are highly conscientious people out there who are working in like extremely detail oriented, corporate positions where I'd say, like, you're going to have an extremely clear idea of exactly what you want to do. And you're going to follow doggedly until you achieve those results. But for an artist, for me, opening those boxes and saying, well, I'm going to encompass a bigger sphere here. That did a world of good for me. And I know it will for other people as well, if they're creatively inclined, especially.
Man, deep. And I think just helping people, unpack in a weird way. I'm trying to process what you're saying, but on the flip side of, off the air, we were talking about how C4 Leaders helps people tell their story through pizza, and then attaching, life's ingredients to your pizza. And what are those ingredients that have been on my pizza that perhaps, I'm 52 years old now, perhaps I don't even know how they got there, but they're just things that have always been part of my life. And can we, again, kind of catch ourselves and take a couple steps back and broaden, are those ingredients the ones that are allowing me to shine and share my gift? Or are those some ingredients that perhaps were put into my life and so to say onto my pizza that are no longer, necessary? And I would like to take them off and add some other ingredients. And I think that's one thing that I would love to hear from you, because I definitely can tell, you run to change, and you seek to constantly transform yourself with viewpoints and so on and so forth. And how do you think you developed that ability? Because change is, I think, one of the most difficult things for people to experience. And so many times we look at change as things that we're losing, that we're having to give up, as opposed to things that ingredients that we can add to our life. What are your thoughts just on change?
Yeah, change. I'm going to take a very broad view of this question. And I love the analogy of the pizza. What are the ingredients you're putting on your pizza, and, put that in the oven and you've got, your kind of ideal life. It's a beautiful analogy. I think, look, when it comes to change, let me tell you an idea by Heraclitus. Heraclitus was this pre-Socratic philosopher about 500 years before Christ. Now, Heraclitus was a kind of mystic poet / philosopher / he's a very strange individual. He was the one who kind of coined the term the logos, which is this extremely, extremely deep Greek word that you really can't get to the bottom of, but ended up making its way all throughout, the kind of virtue ethics of the Hellenistic period, made its way through Stoicism, found its way into the Bible, where John says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God." That the word is actually translated from the term logos, right? Now, so that came from Heraclitus, and one of the things that he said, "Listen, we are standing in a river in life, and that river is constantly changing. It's never the same river, and we are constantly changing. We are never the same." And you think about it, so you step into a river, well, the water is constantly flowing beneath you, right? Okay, so the water that is beneath you right now is not the same water that's coming in this moment, in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. It's always changing. It's always a different river. You think about how our bodies are rejuvenating completely after 7 years. Change is not some sort of abstract theory. It's the conditions under which we are bound in this thing called life. It is always happening at all times. You put a sheet of metal out in the field, you might not see it rusting, but every second it is rusting. You just can't see it because you don't have the perceptual abilities to see that in real time. And so somebody who I am very inspired by creatively and philosophically is Miles Davis. You Americans, you'll love Miles Davis. You have to. He's a genius. He changed the course of the music industry like 4 or 5 times. Now, he seemed to really understand this idea that we are constantly changing. He understood that because look at him, he changed the music industry. All of these times he was constantly listening for what's the new sound, the new way of being, the new philosophy of creativity. And there's this great story that Herbie Hancock tells about Miles Davis. Now, Herbie is on stage with Miles Davis as a young pianist, and he's playing along with his, one of his musical heroes. How could he not be Miles Davis? And the way that Herbie tells it is that he played a wrong chord, right? Now, he was horrified in the moment because he'd played this chord in the wrong place. To him, it didn't sound good. But what Miles did taught Herbie a huge lesson, because what Miles did was he played a note that made the chord that Herbie had played sound right, right? And so to Miles, he wasn't coming to the situation with a whole bunch of ideas about exactly what each musician should do or how they should play, but he was in that moment listening for what was happening around him right here, right now, and he was responding to that situation. And that takes a level of philosophical sophistication, perhaps mystic sophistication. It takes a level of creative sophistication that so few people are able to achieve. And I don't think that I fully achieve that all the time, if ever. It's like how can you get yourself to simply be an observer in this moment and to view the changes that you might need to make in order to make the moment right? Do you know what I mean? And so it's tough, but you're going to be given signs and clues and signals and symbols in your life that will show you, if you're attentive, if you're aware, if you're awake, if you're present, that this is the direction you should go right now. And my job as an artist and also as a philosophical mentor, I mean, like, when I mentor people, I'm not sitting here saying, this is what you should do, this is how you should live your life, here's your 10 steps. I'm listening. I'm paying attention to the conversation. I'm focusing on what are the thoughts and ideas that pop up to me in this moment, in this particular part of the conversation. How can I be of the best service to this person right now? But I'm not asking that question while I'm listening. I'm just listening and paying attention. And as you do that, you're giving somebody the gift of attention, but you're also putting yourself in the right state so that you can respond to this person, this situation, this scenario in the best possible way. And again, I fail at that all the time, but man, if you could be in that place more often than not, I mean, it seems to me like it's highly beneficial. So that would be my advice to people. If you're looking to allow your light to shine, step back, watch yourself. What are the things that you're drawn to? What are the things that repel you? You know, what are the things that bring you deep meaning in life? Watch yourself as if you didn't know who you are, and learn how to respond to those little momentary promptings or callings or clues or signs that are telling you there's a different direction to go here that would be much better for you. So that's my thoughts at this point anyway.
Man, I love the story of Miles and Herbie Hancock. And
two brilliant thinkers, right? Just
oh my gosh.
wild.
Yeah. And not that, I mean, I think a good nurse, to get back into my profession a little bit, a good nurse is in a simple way, if they're able to slow down. And again, COVID, I'm not at the bedside and I'm actually not even working anymore, but my wife is a nurse, my daughter's a nurse, and COVID has made getting into that space so much more challenging. But I think, a nurse who can be in that space can be there for the patient and their families when they do play the wrong chord, and immediately, without anybody knowing, just help them feel like, it was the right thing to say, to do, pick up the right note. I don't obviously know much about music, but what just a beautiful analogy. And then to just have it be where, I'm sure other musicians were able to see that Herbie played the wrong chord, as you were saying. But everybody else in the audience who was just there to just appreciate music didn't even realize that Miles had totally changed everything and made it a beautiful piece at that time, in that moment. Really cool. I'm gonna have to look up that story, because that is really, really, really speaking to me. But I've been so excited. I think this, at some point when we were talking, my thought of the day, I took your beautiful poem, but normally we start with a thought of the day, and now we're like a half hour into this thing. But I'm curious to see your thoughts on this. And I picked this based upon the guest, and it's an interesting one. So I'm just gonna get to it. And it's by Seneca.
Yeah, please.
2 years before he died. So 63 AD, and no one can live happily who has regard for himself alone and transforms everything into a question of his own utility. Why would I pick that one for you?
Yeah, man. I love that quote. I love that. Yeah. And the funny thing is, that's such a perfect one to remind me constantly of why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I do find myself at times falling back into that kind of preset mode of, what can I gain? What can I gain? What can I get? What can I get? And And Seneca is right. You know, Seneca was such a beautiful thinker because he made it very clear from the start of writing his epistles that he was writing these epistles for the later generations, and he wanted to give them something to hold on to, something that they could pass on and something that could benefit their lives. And I really don't even think we've scratched the surface on the influence that somebody like Seneca had on the future generations of our world. I mean, you look at the people who have had Seneca's letters by their bedside, you know, people like Thomas Jefferson, you know, and I'm blanking on the others so far, but if people look up a list, they will find a list of these extremely powerful individuals who have changed the course of history, who are inspired by Seneca. And you think, what I love about Seneca's approach, and this is the approach that I am, if I would say that I'm endeavoring to do something, I would say it's this. You know, nobody looked at Seneca and said, hey, you know what? Stoicism is really hot right now. We want you to write a book about Stoicism and we'll, you know, and push it out there. No, Seneca was doing philosophy. He was deeply engrossed in this process of seeking deeper wisdom for his life and for other people's lives. He was going on that adventure of seeing just how perfected he could make his soul, right? Just how pure he could become in his soul. And look, lots of people will call Seneca a hypocrite. Lots of people will say, well, you know, he advised the Emperor Nero and he was a wealthy investor and he did this and he did that. But it's like, man, okay, when you can speak with the level of integrity and the level of heart and soul that Seneca speaks about this path of wisdom, come and talk to me about hypocrisy. You know, like I really like what Ralph Waldo Emerson said. He said, with consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. He said, speak the truth of today in hard words and speak tomorrow's truth in hard words as well. You know, and Seneca was showing up every day towards the end of his life, and he was writing his epistles after an extremely successful career in public life, in his playwriting. And now he's saying, I want to write these letters and pass on something really meaningful that the future generations can hold on to. And he goes on that adventure of really seeking deeper wisdom, and he carries you along on that adventure. And, you know, he did it because it was something that he had to do. You know, he was a philosopher by heart. He was a playwright and an artist as well. But, you know, somebody like Seneca, you look at that and you think, that's what I want to do. I want to be so engrossed in the question, like you are. You know, you're saying life's essential ingredients. What are the, and you said this at the start of the episode, and I really liked this, that you love trying to answer that question. What are those essential ingredients? Too many people come to it and here's what Stephen Jenkinson said about it. He said, I'm paraphrasing here, by the way, it's going to be nothing like this quote, but he said something like, most people go out there and try to solve the big problems of the world before they've even figured out what the problems are, right? And it seems to me like a way you can navigate that problem itself is by saying, I'm not here to solve the problem immediately, but I'm here to engage in the process of discovering maybe what the problem might be and also what might be the solution to that once I know what questions I'm trying to answer here. And I think Seneca was trying to answer those questions. What is wisdom? And he's doing it for the benefit of humankind. And he's going on that adventure and he brings us along. And I think one of the great things about you reading that quote is just reminds me, as Seneca does so often, that what I'm here to do is to serve my fellow human beings in the pursuit of wisdom and a deeper sense of meaning in their lives. That's what I'm here to do. The poetry, the philosophy, the music is all in service of that. But the way that I can allow that service to happen best is if I get out of the way and allow the adventure to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I love it. And again, from an outsider's perspective, someone that obviously doesn't know you at all and spend some time researching you, I just want to read again the start and why I did pick that quote for you, and you hit it out of the park. But Simon finds great satisfaction in helping artistic and creative clients to think differently about the creative process, and so on and so forth, and to share their gift and to have their gifts shine. And so I think you just live that in the actions that you take on the daily, and then just in listening to you here and sharing these moments with you of how you're just so present and in the moment. And one of the things in preparing for you as well, I think it was Sharon who calls you the intrepid soul traveler. What does she mean by that? And is that just all this stuff that we're talking about, or how you're always just deeply looking into your soul and the souls of the people that you come across? Or what does that description mean to you?
Well, I'll tell you the story of the moment when she called me an intrepid soul traveler. Is when I came back from a work trip last year from Cairns, and not to be mistaken with Mary Cairns Cross. So, but in Cairns, I had another one of those Wayne's World moments where for a few years we'd been doing this work trip, and I always walked past this store in Cairns, the Didge Cafe, something like that. I don't know if they're still open, unfortunately. When I was there last, they were closing down. But every time I walked past there, I saw these didgeridoos, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're not open while we're here, because we kind of passed through there. But last year I said, Jen, I have to get a didgeridoo. I have to, right? So I went in there, and they were closing the store in a few months. And so I got a great deal, and I really appreciate that. And I've got this, it was it was actually kind of like a Harry Potter moment where you walk into the wand store and the wand picks you, the didgeridoo picked me, and I was like, man, I love this instrument. So I came home and I started learning the didgeridoo, and in my same method that I used to learn the piano, just developing a love and a relationship with the instrument. That's it. Just be there with the instrument, play it, have fun. And so I started doing that and recording these little sessions. And as I was recording them, I was also taking little notes on ideas that came into my mind, thoughts, abstract, kind of philosophical concepts. And so I was writing these down, and I find that the didgeridoo is very meditative, and especially if you do the circular breathing. I mean, like, it's almost as if your body becomes this, this one single tube where the air comes in and then it flows through your body and then it flows straight back out through the didgeridoo. And if you're just doing that over and over again, you get into this meditative state. And there's a reason why the Aboriginals believe it's a sacred instrument. And so I'm capturing this wisdom as I'm kind of practicing the didgeridoo, and I put this together in a few pieces that I'll be releasing on the Walled Garden very soon, and on my other website. But I showed this to Sharon, and that's when she called me the intrepid soul traveler, is because I'm, whether it's in my music or in my philosophy or in my poetry, or when I'm walking in nature, or when I'm, writing little bits of wisdom that I'm trying to capture, what I'm doing is I'm exploring the landscape of my soul, and I'm trying to map that landscape. And so, that's the adventure that I guess I'm going on, the internal adventure, I guess. And you could say that the external adventure manifests itself in the books and the albums and the Walled Garden that I'm doing with Sharon LaBelle and Kai Whiting, this community that I'm starting. And, so there's an external adventure there, but I'm always cognizant of the fact that external adventure doesn't happen unless I do the proper philosophical exploration within my own soul. And in that way, everything that I'm doing is, intrepid soul traveling, I guess.
Love it. I love it. So cool. Another great story. In a whole different segue, just personally for you, not philosophically or anything, but what are some of your life's essential ingredients? Like, for example, like just health-wise, of taking care of yourself. I mean, what if the listeners, because obviously for you to get into that space, you're doing a lot of different things. You talked about playing the didgeridoo, but what are some tips that you could give to people to share some of the best things that you do for yourself that allow you to tap into getting into your soul and seeing the souls of the brothers and sisters that you cross on a daily basis.
Yeah. And again, I just love that analogy of the pizza. It helps you to think about it. I mean, like life's essential ingredients. See, I could give you the kind of standard approach of, I have my morning routine and this is what I don't have a morning routine. I'll be completely honest about that. I have no morning routine, and there are times in my life where I'm feeling on fire and ready to go. There are times in my life where I struggle and I go through my own challenges. But when I think of essential ingredients, these are going to be ingredients that other people may or may not find helpful for them, but I'm going to say them because they're my essential ingredients. I have to have forests. I have to have mountains. That's essential. That's one of the things that I said to Jen when we're moving to America. Please just let us move somewhere close to some sort of beautiful nature. I don't care if I have to drive half an hour, but please let us not be like 1 or 2 hours from some sort of beautiful, natural scene. Now I'll call upon the poet Rilke here, and I'll say that, perhaps if I can't find the beauty and the divinity in any place that I'm at, no matter where it is, then I'm not poet enough. That's what he would say. But I need some landscapes like that. I need music. I need a library. And I say a library because while I do really enjoy to read and to spend a lot of time with great authors and poets and philosophers, I would say that there are a lot of times where I just don't feel like reading at all. What I feel like doing is creating. But I still find so much nourishment by knowing that behind me right now is the works of some of the most brilliant minds in history. And so I would say, look, if you're not much of a reader, at least have a few great books on your shelf so that it inspires you when you walk past them. Let the book itself just sit there. And I try to read when I can, but again, like I think there's a time to read and there's a time to absorb that which you have already read and to live it out in your life. So I'd say, okay, so some lofty woodlands, some mountains. I love climbing those. Give me some music, give me some great literature and some great poetry. And here's one other thing that I'm going to say. I've given you the natural cathedral of the forest. That's what I love, but I have to have beautiful architecture as well. My wife and I just returned from a trip to Melbourne to get my visa interview done, and oh my gosh, if you walk around Melbourne with your eyes wide open, there's incredible architecture everywhere, and embodied within that architecture is wisdom and truth and beauty and divinity. And you look at these cathedrals that people built so many years ago and you think, what kind of mindset, what kind of view of their lives as it relates to history would they have to spend their entire life building a building that they will never see completed? And I'll tell you this. There's this beautiful little corner in Brisbane where on one side of the street there's this gorgeous little story-like chapel. Must be one of the oldest buildings in Brisbane. It's just one of those classic stone-built chapels. It just looks so picturesque and beautiful. It could be in a fairy tale, and it inspires you when you look at it. Now, on the other side of the street is this god-awful yellow brick chapel that was built in the 70s or 80s or something like that. And look, what happens inside that chapel may be far more beautiful than the outer exterior. I'll give them that. But what that shows me when I look at that, I think, okay, we need beautiful architecture. We need, because one side of the street you do not feel inspired. The other side you look and you think, oh my gosh, I want to be in that building. And so to me, beauty, architecture, forests, mountains, poetry, just great music, the beauty that comes from nature and culture. If to me, that's a life essential, because it nourishes the soul, it lifts the soul, and that is sorely needed in our time today.
I love it, and I love the culture, and just a little follow-up on that, and totally agree and love everything that you said. Where does food fall into your culture and your appreciation of artistry? And just that whole pageantry of going to a nice dinner, having music, having food, great company. Where does that fall into things for you?
Well, I will say that in my little family, Jen, my wife, she is definitely the chef, and I am not. I'm great composing a poem and a piece of music and stuff like that. She does far better than I do in the kitchen. I will say that. But you're right. It's funny. This idea of beauty, it's not. And artistry as well. It's not simply refined to architecture and natural spaces and literature. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, the art of living is what philosophy is trying to teach us. The art of living, and that means that no matter what you do, you can treat it as an art form. And what I do love is seeing brilliant culinary skill and art, because that certainly is something. The culinary endeavors that certainly exist within the artistic world, and so I mean, great food, great company, absolutely. But I think that I tend to be more of a solitary figure. I will say that. It's funny because I have this very external presence. I've got the podcast and I do this mentoring with people. We run meetups and I love working with people, but nonetheless, the reason perhaps why many of my life's essential ingredients tend to be me in a place, whether it's in a museum or going through a forest or to this cathedral, is just because I tend to be somewhat of a solitary figure. I don't so much mind the company of myself and experiencing these things on my own, though I am always open and delighted to have human company, you might say. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but
No.
Put it out there.
Love it. Got a weird question for you, and then we're getting ready to wrap this up, and hopefully I can even get this out the right way. But I'm definitely, this show is not political, but there's some potential challenges, coming up, and I guess I'll try and just make it a general question of just looking at some of the challenges of the world today. And I think it's just overwhelming when you start to think about it. And I think the answer to so many of these challenges has got to be in just building each other's character and focusing on the things that we can control. What values, from all your studies and everything, if you could list a few for you were gonna get called in. You're in Anaheim. They found out, oh man, Simon Drew is here. He just moved, and I want him to come talk to my freshman class. And you got 300 14-year-old boys and girls, and you get to wave your wand like Harry Potter over them, and you're going to sprinkle them with these character traits, these values that are going to transform their life. Which ones would you pick? And perhaps why? That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is. And I'll do my best to give an answer that has at least the seeds of wisdom. and see if we can nurture them into something of a plant. But yeah, it's difficult because you've also added young, teenagers, and that's such a formative period of their life, right? And I'll give you a couple of things. I'm very interested in how we can help people to go on the adventure of polishing their soul, perfecting their character. Because I'm like you, I think, it's easy to look around the world and think, okay, where am I going to get my life satisfaction from? And then we get obsessed with politics, and we just, this team and that team, and they're wrong. But people have to realize by now, you're not going to get a sense of life meaning and satisfaction from politics unless you, by your nature, are a politician and that's what you do. That's going to bring you a deep sense of meaning because that's the work that you're called to do. But for the most of us, that's not going to be it. And, there's so many things in our life that we can think, well, am I going to get it from this? Okay, well, fitness and health, great, I'm going to go there. But even that can go way too far. You see people who just get obsessed with their fitness and health, and all of a sudden they're spending 3 hours at the gym each day, and it's not their career, it's not their calling, but they're doing it because, I've got to get down to that body fat percentage. And it's like, well, do you really want to spend 3 hours at the gym each day? Like, what are you missing? And there are some people who that's their calling. That's what they want to do. I've worked in the gym industry. I know these people want to be in the gym 3 hours a day. But for the most of us, that's not, it's going to be a repeating cycle of constantly feeling as though we need to do more. I'm with you. I think that the perfection of the character is what leads you to finding that balance, that harmony in your life, where each part of your life works together as if it's a symphony and each instrument is playing its part. But what I would say to young people is try to find a really healthy balance when you're beginning this process of perfecting your character, of working on yourself, going through this personal development. Find a healthy balance that is going to get you there. Like with my own creativity, I've noticed that for me, I guess the principle that works the best is a balance of play and structure. We need to explore, yes. And so go out there and, explore your possibilities, explore your potential. Who could you be if you were aiming at the highest possible good in your life? And by the way, that's a question that you should think about for a very long time if you're listening to this is, am I really aiming at the highest possible good for my life? That would be probably number one. You should figure out what it would mean to aim at the highest possible good for your life. But so yeah, a balance of structure and play. Explore, yes, but also have a certain amount of structure to your life so that it keeps that play within certain bounds, within certain walls, that so it's not going to be too much play or too much structure. And on that note, I would say that some of the best advice that I got along those similar lines is from Epictetus, the philosopher. He said, philosophy is the love of wisdom. It's the art of living a good life. And, we're weeding our soul's vices, and, we're trying to, nurture the best of ourselves. And the way that you do that is through a careful balance of self-scrutiny applied with kindness. And so many people, when they jump into the game of kind of personal development, trying to better themselves, perfecting their character, perfecting their soul, what ends up happening, and I've done this as well, is you just go far too far in the direction of self-scrutiny. Like, oh man, I'm terrible. Like I should be like this. I should be like that. I should be, where this person is. I should be where that person is. And, you can just start to eat away at your potential by just simmering in that self-scrutiny that has gone way too far. But what Epictetus reminds us of is have the self-kindness there as well. Recognize that you're imperfect. Recognize that you're not going to get to where you want to be today. It's going to be a slow, incremental process towards what would be good for you. And this comes back to what Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, said as well. He said that progress is made little by little, but is no little thing in itself. So always come back to that self-kindness, and self-scrutiny mixed together in a harmonious balance. And the final thing I'm going to say, sorry, now you've got me onto like a stream of thoughts here and I can't stop. So some of the best advice I've actually gotten from Jordan Peterson, and people have their own opinions of him and who he is. I've tended to find that the people who have the harshest opinions of him are the people who have listened to his work the least. But there are two questions or two ideas that he's given me that I've tried to share with every single one of my clients as often as I can. Number one, he says you should conceptualize the highest possible good for your life that would be good for you and for your family and for your community. And then you should aim at that. But that's not all. He said, because what have you got to do that's better than that? Now, when he said that, I was like, whoa, okay, that's a logical corner that he's backed me into. There's nothing better than doing that. So I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that he said is treat yourself as if you're somebody worth taking care of. Because most of us don't treat ourselves like that. Most of us treat ourselves very, very poorly. And we do not give ourselves the self-kindness or the self-understanding or the space to grow into this person who we're wanting to become. And so I would say just take a look at the people who you love in your life. How do you treat them? How would you treat a person who you genuinely care about and want to nourish their soul? You should treat yourself in the same way. And so to me, it's always about finding that balance, that harmony between these seeming opposites, but if they work together, it can keep you in the center of that straight and narrow path as opposed to going too far to one side, I guess.
Woo! I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. No, great practical answers. Again, we're on Life's Essential Ingredients with Simon J.E. Drew. You can find him, simonjedrew.com, The Walled Garden. My last question for you, there's a great quote from John Alston. The only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. Not to sound too morbid to you, but I told you I'm a nurse and I've been surrounded by death. Let's fast forward for you 60 years or so, and you've lived an incredible life. And you are on your deathbed and you're surrounded by the people that have been instrumental in your life. What is it that you want them to take away from the time they had with you?
Well, my sense is that after this question, we're going to wrap this up. And I have to say one thing before we do, which is Jeff, what am I saying? Man, I love you. Like, I love your approach. And this has been such a beautiful conversation. I really appreciate you letting me just ramble on with all of these ideas. But, I want this to be the beginning of a relationship between us so that we can continue these conversations, because This has just been such a pleasure. Okay, so what do I want to leave behind? Well, it's not morbid at all. I want to tell you why. I have a couple of tattoos on my arms. One of them says amor fati. That means love your fate, right? Step back, listen to the clues you're being given. Look at the scenario in your life, the situation that you're in right now, and say, I'm going to love what is in front of me, and I'm going to go on the adventure of life that's being presented to me. The other arm has memento mori, which is Latin for remember death, right? So essentially, have death on your mind as much as you can, because you don't have much time. Seneca said, life is like a play. It's not the length that matters. It's the excellence of the acting. As somebody who I would say I ascribe to the Stoic philosophy, even though I'm a terrible Stoic. It's the philosophy that I try to embody within myself, and as a part of that, I try to recognize that death is a natural and constant thing that we have to grapple with in our lives. Death is not an event on the horizon. It's something that is happening every day, because every day we are dying into our death, right? And so we have to think about these things and what do I want to leave behind? Time will tell how successful I have been in this mission. And so I'm not claiming that I've arrived, but what I would love to leave behind, what would be good, I believe, is if I could leave behind some breadcrumbs that would perhaps lead people towards a life that is deeply meaningful, that gives them access to certain deep wisdom that would help them and others, and that shows them what it's like to truly dance in life, might be a good way to put it. I'll leave it at that.
I love it. I love it. Again, you can find him at simonjedrew.com and The Walled Garden. Make sure you listen into that. It's been another incredible episode of Life's Essential Ingredients. Can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing all your wisdom. And really made my day. I got 2 full pages of notes of things that I'm going to be looking up, and definitely I've taken your breadcrumbs and gonna take them and add them into my life's essential ingredients, and I appreciate you so much for that. With that, listeners, we're out. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. We'll see you next week.